For the western door, Pagisimutak, which is the place of the setting sun, the place where we start to prepare for autumn, fall, like seasonal change, for the darkening. The western door is also where the thunderbirds sit, which are my spirit relatives, who really teach us and remind, for me, about empathy, having empathy for myself, having empathy for others. The old ones say kitamagitawin, which means to take care of one another, to take care of our hearts, our kite, and to support one another with listening, with honoring, and with holding space for our wellness, for our healing. Pakisimotak is also the doorway of Maskwa, of bear, our bear relatives who really help us on our healing journey. So for this doorway, I wanted to also talk about obstacles and challenges that being a performing artist, a vocalist, a Métis, two-spirit person, some of the challenges that I faced, and in particular one story, as a way to also speak about how in our journeys and on these paths as creators, following our gifts, pursuing truth, tapwewin, belonging, miskasowin, wagutuwin, kinship, and coming back to our place in the circle doesn't always happen in a clear, straight path. Obviously not, we're queer, but also there's often obstacles that will come into our path. So we can never get too ahead of ourselves. We really have to take space to take stock of where we're at. And this is where mentorship, kinship, collaboration, eldership, having a support network, community to help us, assist us, guide us when we come across challenges. So I wanted to share a piece that I wrote called Coyote, that I wrote for a performance that was happening in Alberta. I'd been invited to come back and to share my story, to share some of my history and lineage as a Métis person who was born and raised in Calgary on Treaty 7 land, and who had deep connections to Cypress Hills and to different areas and places within Alberta. And so I did a deep dive into my Métis relatives, so my personal history, as well as what was the history of the Métis people in different sites and spaces of Treaty 7. And I had some conversations with a Métis elder through the Métis Nation, and we spoke about, the discovery of beads buried in the land that would have been from Métis folks, a few hundred years back, and how there's traces and markings in the territory of our people moving around, traveling, trading different goods, beads being one of them, different, leather work, different animals, beavers, and, what were some of those teachings. And I also drew from the quote from Louis Riel, "My people will sleep for 100 years, but when they awake, it will be the artists who give them their spirit back." And so I really took this to heart, that my role, and in this particular project, I wanted to be able to breathe spirit back into our stories, our histories, and our lineages from personal and collective places. And this was a hugely transformational performance for me. It was incredibly emotional because I was speaking about my own personal story as well as these collective stories and the levels of fragmentation, dislocation, forced displacement that our people had gone through as Métis people from Red River, Treaty 1 area. My family's from Fort Ellis, Saint-François Xavier, Saint Boniface, and then down into southern Saskatchewan and Katepwa, Fort LeBret Mission, and then up into Alberta, St. Paul de Métis, Jasper House, and different territories, and how the scattering of relations to land meant a lot of the time not feeling belonging. But I went into those stories that I shared in the first episode about the Cypress Hills and about singing under that Milky Way sky and being in right relation with family and kin, and returning there years later after receiving an invitation from a Métis elder and storyteller, and how I wanted to reweave those places, those relationships to place as a way to belong and reaffirm my belonging as a Métis person. Unfortunately, when I went back the next year to work on this project, there had been some land claims issues between the Métis people and a couple other First Nations communities in the south of Alberta. And so there was a lot of political pressure and lateral violence and dynamics that had kind of risen to the surface. Nothing that was directly because of me, but because my poem, my story, my performance spoke about particular landmarkings named Métis and Louis Riel, I was told that I wasn't allowed and I couldn't perform it that second year. This shattered me. This shattered my notion of self, my notion of my voice, of everything that I'd worked towards. They told me I wasn't allowed to use the M word and that I couldn't quote Louis Riel. And, you know, if I was in a different place in my life, I might have just said, I'm leaving, and I would have turned away. But instead, I called on Mushroom Bob Smoker and other helpers and elders, and I shared what this violence was that I was experiencing and how they wanted me to be silent and to not talk about things and to not share my story. And I did a lot of healing work and a lot of screaming out in the woods, and I found myself just outside of Calgary, just north of Calgary, on a friend's acreage one night. And I was about to go to bed. I was the last one up, and I looked out the window before turning off the lights, and I saw the northern lights, the aurora borealis, beautiful blue, green, just like dancing in the sky. And so I'd received the teachings to go and to put chisema, to put tobacco down. And so I walked outside, and it was so dark, like I couldn't even see my hands in front of me. And as I went to put tobacco down, I heard the coyotes start to yip and howl. And I received this as a message that I'm supported, that these guides, these storytellers, these tricksters, and all my relatives up there in Sky World, they want me to continue, they want me to go through with this, and that I have to find a way to subvert that violence and to speak through it and beyond it as a way to transform it. And so the piece that I ended up creating is called Coyote, and it's this vision of Coyote coming to me and being tethered, being bound by this iron wire. When I think of the colonial project and process, it was the advancement of capitalism and commercialism and the desire of the so-called Canadian government that was still forming to create that iron road, that railway that started to rupture and dislocate our families, our nations, from territories, from lifeways, from trapping and hunting pathways, migratory routes of the bison, of the deer, the elk, caribou, you name it. And that it's that iron wire that's actually the source point of this colonial violence that I was experiencing. And so I created that piece, and it's an offering I want to make here. And in the chorus of that piece, I again come back to those four bodies and the four elements and the four directions as those guiding posts, as those kotowana, those fires that we have to tend to and we have to keep. So I say, may the fire from my lips burn away the iron wire. Like, may my voice, may my truth, may all that I speak and sing burn this colonial process, burn that iron down. May the water from my eyes, may the tears that I'm crying through this healing, through this transformation, through this pain and anger and rage that I have about the colonial project, may that wash away the ash. May the wind in my belly clear away the ash. So may my breath of life, each time that I breathe, each time that I take in that breath of creation, may that clear, may the wind pass through me. My elder Senapan Thunder always says that when we want to let go of something, go stand out into the wind and let that wind clear through you. Let it take away your worry, let it take away your fear, let it take away all the things that aren't serving you. And may the earth in my heart map that spirit path. Help me to see where I need to go, where I need to move, what my walk needs to be, and may I trust those messages from my heart. So this piece, Coyote, I share it It is involving the looping pedal and some of those layers, and it's calling in our relations, our grandmother spirit helpers. It's speaking to those beads that original Métis elder shared with me about the beads in the earth. It's quoting Louis Riel without quoting him directly. My people, we were asleep for almost 100 years, and at the end of this performance I say, but now we're waking up. O te pimsewa, oneness ska. We are waking up as those free people, as the tastawaya ko te pimsewak, for me, as the in-between free people, those who own themselves. And we're taking back our spirits through song, through creation, and through the gifts that we share with the world. So to close off this journey, we come to the northern direction, the northern doorway, which in Nehiawewen is Kiwetnuk. So the northern doorway really connects us to coming home. It is the going home wind and the northern star direction. This is a really important direction in that this is where our bison relatives live, Pasquale Mostoswa. And one of those teachings that the bison bring us is really about community and really about facing the storm head on together. So the bison, when they come across or they come into stormy weather, they had to survive through these great cold northern winters that we have. And life gets hard sometimes. And instead of trying to go around the storm or turn away, the bison's intuition and instinct that they've received through generations, through that matriarchy, through those old grandmother bison, is that we have to approach the storm head on and we have to go together straight through. So I share that as a way to really gather up our bundles and some of those reflection points that I've made throughout these episodes. What's our story, what's our memory of the gifts that we hold, and where did we learn them, receive them, what are those core memories in our lives, that story, how we found our voice, our skills, who are our collaborators, our elders, our dream visions of where we want to be, and what are the teachings and the learnings that we want to receive, and who's going to help us get there. What is the message that we want to carry forward? So what is it we want to speak to and about, and how is that personal as well as collective? What are we resisting and what are we existing in and through the creations that we're making? And for this northern doorway to sort of close off, how are we able to share what we've learned and share those gifts with community? And so I really think a lot about my own journey as a facilitator, as someone who has been facilitating creative workshops that include ceremony, poetry, collective song creation, opening and closing circles. They've been intergenerational, intercultural, and how important it has been not just for the communities that I am serving and connecting with, but for myself, how much I've learned through mapping out and envisioning what are the skills and the gifts and the tools that are going to help build our community, grow that circle, call others into the circle, and give them the creative strength, courage, and capacity to then be able to take those skills and continue to build community so that we can face the storm head on together. And so I want to ask you what your skills that you've learned and that you've grown throughout your creative practice, that you're still growing, could potentially support others in their own creative journeys and paths. What collaborators, whether that be artistic, cultural, ceremonial collaborators, do you want to work with to make those offerings? So both from a facilitation perspective, but also what organizations, community, cultural, educational, creative could potentially host workshops that you might want to offer that could benefit and help grow the community? And what are the experiences you've had in learning environments that have taught you what you best learn with, from, and through. So I know for myself, it's like experiential learning when I can be like hands-on in my body, when I can see somebody model and demonstrate something, processed, a project, songwriting, co-creation, and then I can try to, mirror that, model that, do that myself. Those have been the best formats and best methods that I've learned within. And so what is your most ideal learning environment? And then what is the kind of package or the bundle that you'd want to make that offering in? Would you want to use a language to, pinpoint some of the primary values or teachings that you're going to uplift or you're going to engage that community offering with? So is this workshop about finding belonging within the circle, about using our voice, each of us individually, then collectively, as a way of modeling and mapping that notion of belonging into our being? Are we creating with gifts from the land and from the earth? Are we writing a song inspired by meditation or a conversation or a connection we had with a tree or a plant or a river? And so I ask those questions because I think it's really important as we learn and as we grow and as we're building ourselves up as creators who are offering, whether it's a product, whether it's a performance, how are we also giving back to the communities that are supporting us and uplifting our voices and our practices by continuing that transmission and helping others grow so that 7 generations backwards and forwards can continue to move through us, and we can be part of that lineage, part of that continuum, because we're all part of that constellation. We're all part of that herd. We're all part of that community of bison that are going to be moving through this crazy world that we're currently in, part of which we've inherited and part of which we're working to find better maps and better routes forward. So that's my closing northern doorway, Kiwetanok, the going home direction, giving back to community and continuing that cycle of I'm going to need you as much as you're going to need me. Kinanaskom tinawao, kichi marsi, ni wakumaganak, ni totamak. Thank you to all my relatives. Thank you to all my friends, and for all of you emerging artists, entrepreneurs, creators out there. You can reach me through Instagram. That's usually how folks reach out, or through email, which is kind of scattered around the internet. If you have any questions or comments, please include them in the chat. And I'm always happy to hear from folks if something that I've shared has inspired you or a tool that you want to learn more about. I'm very much open to sharing more, to growing these networks and these, constellations of care and support for Métis, Two-Spirit, Indigenous, queer, questioning, trans, for all of our community members so that we can, come back into the circle. So hi.